Brrr. It is cold out there, folks, and we are all bundled up inside. So we figured, why not take a deep dive into this polar vortex thing, this deep freeze that's gripping the U.S. right now.
Yeah, a lot of people are really feeling this one.
I bet. We've got a ton of articles and reports and even some survival tips that we're going to be going over.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, to help keep you warm and safe and informed, right?
Right.
And we've even included links to some helpful resources and products in the description, so be sure to check those out.
Absolutely.
So today we're gonna uncover what this polar vortex actually is. Like what is it?
Right.
And how to stay warm, even if the power goes out. Knock on wood.
Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Hopefully not. But if it does, we got you covered. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how to protect yourself from the dangers of extreme cold.
You got it.
So first things first, what exactly is a polar vortex?
It sounds pretty menacing.
It does sound kind of scary.
Right. But honestly, it's not some new terrifying weather monster.
No.
The polar vortex is just this large area of low pressure and cold air that just swirls around the Earth's poles. It's always there.
So it's like always there. This isn't something new. It's always been there.
Right. It's always there. But sometimes it expands.
Like a balloon.
Yeah, exactly. Like a balloon pushing that super cold air down south. And that's exactly what's happening now across a large part of the U.S.
And judging from these pictures, it looks pretty intense.
It does.
Like Denver's buried in snow. Cars are slipping and sliding all over icy roads. It really shows how widespread this thing is.
Absolutely. Yeah, the impact is huge. Like from the Rockies to the East Coast, even the Gulf Coast is getting snow and ice. I mean, seeing snow in places that usually have warm, sunny weather, that's pretty unusual.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And some places are expecting temperatures to plummet below zero, with wind chills as low as -40. Now that's dangerously cold.
Yeah, it is. And actually, several cities are prepping for some of their coldest temperatures in almost a decade.
Wow.
And the thing is, even if you are in an area that doesn't typically see this kind of bitter cold, you still need to be prepared. This is not the time to be caught off guard.
Right. Even those snowbirds who are like, we're going south to escape the winter, they're going to be in for a rude awakening this year, huh?
Yeah, I think so. This cold air mass is reaching far and wide.
Okay, so we've got this massive cold front moving across the country. And one thing that really jumps out from these articles is the concern about power outages.
Yeah, and for good reason. Because, I mean, when you've got this extreme cold, it really puts a strain on the power grid.
Oh.
And when it's this cold and you lose power...
No, that's bad.
Yeah, it can become dangerous quickly.
So we're going beyond just like the basic weather here. We want to get practical and give some tips.
Right.
So if the power goes out, what can people do to stay warm? What are some things they can do right away?
Well, one of the most important things to remember is that it's more efficient to heat the person, not the entire house.
Right.
Focus on keeping yourself warm first and foremost.
That makes sense. So like layering up.
Absolutely. Layering is crucial. Think of it like the onion principle.
Onion principle.
Yeah, multiple layers trap heat much more effectively than just one big bulky layer.
Oh.
Right. And choosing the right materials is equally important. Natural fibers like wool and down. Those are amazing insulators.
So we're talking like loose, comfortable layers, not like squeezing into that too tight sweater.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You want to trap air between those layers for insulation.
Got it. Okay, so loose layers, what else can people do to stay warm if the power's out? I'm getting cold just thinking about it.
I know. People often forget about keeping their feet warm.
Oh, feet?
Yeah. So having the right footwear is super important, of course. But, believe it or not, keeping those laces loose can actually help with blood circulation. And consider some thick, warm socks. Those can make a world of difference. Even a simple foot massage can get the blood flowing and warm you up.
Oh, that's a good tip. What about hot water bottles? I've always heard those are lifesavers.
Yeah. They're surprisingly effective for localized warmth, And warm rocks can work too. Just make sure they're, wrapped up securely so you don't get burned.
Right.
Even radiant heat sources can make a difference.
Like a fireplace.
Yeah, like a fireplace, exactly. But even a simple candle can provide a surprising amount of radiant heat in a small space. So don't underestimate the power of a candle. And of course, there's always warm drinks. and food.
Yeah, big mug of hot chocolate
Yeah.
always does the trick. Are there certain foods or drinks that people should focus on during a cold snap like this?
Yeah, well, warm broths are amazing for warming you up from the inside out.
Yeah.
And there are certain foods and spices that are thought to have like warming properties,
Oh, interesting.
like ginger and spicy peppers.
Go.
They can help boost your circulation and make you feel warmer.
Those are great tips.
Yeah.
So we've covered ways to keep ourselves warm, but what about keeping the house warm during a power outage? What are some safe and effective methods for that?
Well, there are a few options, but safety should always be the top priority.
Of course.
If you happen to have a portable generator, you can use it to power your furnace.
Yeah.
However, you absolutely have to do it correctly.
Yeah.
You'll need a heavy-duty double pole, double throw switch,
Wow.
and you need to disconnect the main breaker
To prevent what?
to prevent dangerous backfeeding into the power grid.
Ah, so you don't want to accidentally electrocute the neighborhood lineman.
Exactly. Safety first. Now, some people might think about using propane or kerosene heaters, but I would advise a lot of caution with those indoors.
Yeah, I've always heard they can be a fire hazard.
Yes, and an even bigger concern is carbon monoxide,
Oh, right.
which is odorless and colorless,
It's fiery.
Yeah, making it incredibly dangerous. If you must use one of those heaters, just make sure you have proper ventilation
Okay,
and working carbon monoxide detectors.
got it. So those heaters are kind of a last resort.
Yeah.
Are there safer alternatives?
If you have one and you know how to use it safely, a wood-burning stove can be very efficient.
Uh-huh.
And there are some creative DIY solutions out there, like the flower pot heater, which uses candles to generate radiant heat in a small space. It's a pretty neat idea.
Ooh, I like that. We'll be sure to include information about those flower pot heaters in the episode description.
Yeah, good idea.
But even if you manage to stay warm during a power outage, this kind of extreme cold can still be dangerous, right?
Right.
Like what about hypothermia and frostbite?
Yeah, those are two major concerns.
Yeah. Can you give us a quick rundown on those? Like what are they and what should people look out for? I feel like we've all heard of them, but what do they actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So hypothermia happens when your body temperature drops dangerously low.
Okay.
And believe it or not, it can happen quickly
Really?
in these temperatures, especially when you factor in the wind chill.
Yeah, we've got this wind chill chart here, and it really shows how fast frostbite can set in. At 0 degrees with even a slight breeze, exposed skin can freeze in just minutes.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's so essential to be able to recognize the warning signs of both hypothermia and frostbite.
Okay.
Hypothermia can cause uncontrollable shivering, confusion, slurred speech, and even drowsiness.
Wow.
And frostbite, well, it starts with numbness and tingling
Yeah.
in the affected area, and it might look white or pale.
So if you notice any of those signs in yourself or someone else, it's time to seek medical attention,
Right.
like right away.
Absolutely. Don't wait. These conditions can become life-threatening if they aren't treated quickly.
Right.
So prevention is key.
So what can people do to protect themselves? What are the best ways to prevent hypothermia and frostbite?
Well, limit your time outdoors,
Yeah.
especially during the coldest periods and when it's windy. And of course, dress warmly, in layers,
Right.
cover all exposed skin,
Yeah.
and pay special attention to your extremities, hands, feet, ears, nose.
Gotcha.
You lose a lot of heat from those areas.
That's a good point.
And it's so important to stay dry because wet clothing can really speed up heat loss.
Right. So layers, warmth, and dryness.
Boom.
Got it. But what if, even with all these precautions, someone finds themselves in like an emergency situation?
Well, that's where emergency preparedness comes in.
Mhm.
And it's something we can't stress enough.
Right. And I see a lot of these sources are really emphasizing the importance of having an emergency kit ready to go.
Yeah, it's truly essential, especially if you're facing a power outage or could potentially be stranded somewhere. Your kit should include warm clothing, blankets, a flashlight with extra batteries, food bars, a first aid kit, a multi-tool, a fire starter, a whistle, duct tape, and even plastic sheeting.
Wow. That's a lot.
And don't forget about water. Aim for at least a gallon per person per day.
Okay. It
Yeah.
seems like a lot to remember, but I guess it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared.
Yeah, you got it. And it's not just about having the supplies, it's also about knowing how to use them. effectively.
Okay.
And that's where knowledge and preparation really come into play.
Right, and that's what we're aiming to do with this deep dive is just give people the knowledge to make smart decisions and stay safe during this extreme weather.
Yeah. And I think it's especially important to remember that this polar vortex is affecting a huge area.
Right.
Even places that aren't used to this kind of extreme cold.
That's a really good point. This isn't just a problem for people who live in, typically cold climates. This is something everyone needs to take seriously no matter where you live.
Exactly.
We're going to keep talking about this and get into some specific tips and scenarios after a quick word from our sponsors. But don't worry, we'll be right back.
Stay warm. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you are all staying warm out there.
Yeah, I hope so too.
We've laid the groundwork,
Right.
understanding what this polar vortex is and why it's so incredibly cold. And we've touched on some overall strategies to stay warm.
Right. Now let's get into some more specific situations.
Okay.
Let's say the power is out.
Oh.
You're bundled up in all those layers we talked about, but you're still feeling chilly.
Right.
What are some things people can do to really crank up the warmth?
Well, remember how we talk about heating the person instead of the whole house?
Right.
Well, let's take that idea a step further. Instead of trying to warm up a whole room,
Yeah.
try creating a microclimate.
A microclimate. Okay, that sounds pretty high tech. What does that actually mean?
Think of it like building a little pocket of warmth just for you.
Yeah.
If you have a small tent, you can actually pitch it inside your house.
Really?
And it works wonders.
Inside your house?
Yeah. Wow.
It traps your body heat and becomes surprisingly cozy.
So you're saying turn your living room into a camping trip.
Exactly.
I kind of like that idea.
It might sound a little silly, but it can really make a big difference in staying warm. Another thing people often forget is the importance of staying hydrated.
Wait, really? I thought we were supposed to be loading up on hot chocolate and tea to stay warm.
Well, warm drinks are great, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But you also need to make sure you're drinking enough water. Dehydration can actually make you more susceptible to the cold.
Huh. I never knew that.
Yeah.
So hot cocoa and a glass of water, check. What about cooking?
Okay.
I know a lot of our listeners are probably wondering about how to, cook or heat food
Right.
if the power goes out.
It's definitely something to consider.
Yeah. You're right. Those frozen dinners won't do you much good without a working microwave. A camping stove is a fantastic option. Just make sure you have, enough fuel, whether it's propane or butane, to last for a few days. And don't forget a manual can opener
Right.
if you're planning on relying on canned goods.
Good point, yeah. I've seen a lot of people online talking about those Mr. Buddy propane heaters.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those?
They're certainly popular,
Yeah.
but I would advise using them with a lot of caution.
Okay.
While they're often marketed as safe for indoor use, there's always a risk of carbon monoxide buildup.
Right.
So never use one in a small enclosed space. And make absolutely sure you have a working carbon monoxide detector.
Got it. So propane heaters, use them with caution. Got it.
Yes.
Are there any other heating methods you'd recommend?
Kerosene heaters are another option, but again, ventilation is key.
Right.
They can put out a lot of heat, but they also produce fumes. You don't want to be breathing those in. A lot of people swear by wood-burning stoves, which can be very efficient, but of course, you need to have one installed.
Right.
And know how to use it safely.
It sounds like when it comes to heating during a power outage, it really depends on your individual setup and what resources you have available.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so important to think ahead and have a plan. And part of that plan should definitely include staying informed about the weather. All of these articles really stress the importance of paying attention to weather forecasts and warnings.
Right. The National Weather Service is such a great resource for that.
It is.
They're constantly updating their forecasts and issuing alerts for severe weather conditions.
I think a lot of people forget how quickly conditions can change, especially when you factor in wind chill.
Speaking of wind chill, that chart we talked about earlier really puts things in perspective. Like at 10 degrees Fahrenheit with a 15-mile-per-hour wind, it feels like minus 19. And that's enough to cause frostbite in less than 30 minutes.
Wow. Yeah, those numbers are a serious wake-up call.
Yeah.
And they highlight why it's so crucial to dress properly for the conditions. We already talked about layering, but you also need to make sure you're covering all exposed skin.
Right.
I'm picturing, a face mask, a hat that covers the ears, gloves, the whole 9 yards.
The whole 9 yards. Exactly.
Don't forget about those feet either. Thick, warm socks. Waterproof boots are essential. And if you're going to be outside for any length of time, those little hand and foot warmer packets
Oh, yeah.
can be lifesavers.
I always keep a stash of those in my winter coat.
Good idea.
They really can make a big difference, especially if you're spending time outdoors. So we talked a lot about staying warm, but what about other safety concerns during this polar vortex?
Okay.
What should people be thinking about in terms of, staying safe overall?
Well, icy roads and sidewalks are definitely a major concern. I've seen some pretty scary videos of cars sliding all over the place.
It's frightening. And it's a good reminder that if you have to drive, make sure your vehicle is ready for winter conditions.
Right.
That means having good tires with plenty of tread, checking your fluids, making sure your battery's in good shape.
And if you're walking, just take it slow and be extra careful because, black ice can be really hard to see.
Yeah?
And even a short fall can be dangerous, especially when it's this cold.
Right. What about people who might be traveling during this cold snap?
Okay.
What are some tips for staying safe on the road?
Being prepared is key. You'll want to pack an emergency kit for your car that includes, extra warm clothing, blankets, food, water, and a first aid kit.
Right.
You never know when you might get stuck somewhere.
And of course, make sure your phone is charged. That seems like a no-brainer, but it's easy to forget.
Absolutely. And it's always a good idea to let someone know your travel plans.
Oh, right.
And your expected arrival time. That way, if something happens and you get stranded, someone knows where you are and when to expect you.
Another thing I've seen mentioned a lot is the importance of checking on elderly neighbors or those with health conditions.
Oh, that's such a great point. They're much more vulnerable to the cold and might need a little extra help during extreme weather events like this.
Right.
It's all about looking out for each other.
It's a good reminder that it's not just about, taking care of ourselves.
Right.
It's about taking care of our community as a whole.
You got it. We're all in this together. And speaking of community, this polar vortex really raises some broader questions, doesn't it?
You mean about climate change?
Yeah.
And whether we're prepared for increasingly unpredictable weather.
Exactly. It's not just about getting through this one cold snap,
Right.
It's about what this might mean for the future.
Right.
And what we can do to prepare.
It definitely highlights the importance of things like investing in, resilient infrastructure,
Yeah.
developing sustainable energy solutions, and having robust emergency response systems in place.
Yeah, it's crucial for all of us to be part of the conversation and to advocate for policies that prioritize climate action and community resilience.
We'll be sure to include some resources on those topics in the episode description.
Good idea.
We've covered a lot of ground here today. Everything from the science behind the polar vortex to practical tips for staying safe and warm during this extreme cold.
Hopefully you feel, armed with the knowledge and resources you need to weather this cold snap
Right.
and any other challenges that come your way.
We'll be right back after a quick break with some final thoughts and some additional resources to help you stay informed
Yes.
and prepared. Stay tuned. As we've been talking about all this, I've been thinking about how resourceful people can be, especially during, tough times like these.
Oh, it's amazing.
You know?
Yeah. There's so much practical wisdom out there, and it's heartwarming to see people, coming together to share tips and advice,
Oh,
especially online.
yeah, I was reading through some online forums, and one commenter mentioned stuffing towels under doors to block drafts.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a simple thing,
Right.
but it can make a real difference.
Even there's little things that can really add up.
Okay.
And that idea we talked about earlier,
Huh?
using a tent indoors
Yeah,
to create a microclimate, that's just brilliant.
I'm definitely going to try that next time the power goes out. What about you? Did any of the tips we discussed really stand out to you?
I was really struck by how important it is to focus on heating the person
Right.
rather than the whole house. It's such a basic principle, but it's easy to forget when you're so used to central heating.
It's true. We often think about keeping the entire house at a comfortable temperature. But when it comes down to it, conserving energy and focusing on your core body temperature is key.
Yeah, and on that note, I loved that tip about loosening your boot laces to improve circulation.
I know. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it.
Yeah, restricting blood flow to your extremities can actually make you feel colder overall.
Exactly.
So loosen those laces, grab that hot water bottle, and pile on those blankets.
Sounds like a cozy plan.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed when there's so much information flying around about extreme weather.
Right. There's so much to consider. Staying warm, staying safe, preparing for unexpected situations, it can definitely feel like a lot.
Yeah, and that's why we really wanted to use this deep dive to distill the most important information.
Right.
The key takeaways that will actually help you in practical ways.
Exactly. We want to empower you to assess your own situation, make informed decisions, and take action to stay safe.
And we made sure to provide links to additional resources so you can continue learning and stay up to date on the latest information.
Knowledge is power, especially when you're dealing with Mother Nature.
Couldn't agree more.
As we wrap up, we want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Think back to the last time your power went out unexpectedly.
How prepared were you?
Yeah. What's one thing you could do today to feel more ready for the unexpected?
Maybe it's something simple, like buying a few extra blankets
Right.
or putting together a basic emergency kit.
Or maybe it's, about learning more about alternative heating methods or practicing some of those layering techniques we talked about.
Whatever it is, take action. Don't wait for the next emergency to happen.
Yeah, because when it comes to extreme weather, a little bit of preparation goes a long way.
Stay warm out there, everyone.
And stay informed.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious.